So first of all, highly recommend a podcast called The History Chicks, and they did a full episode on Zelda Fitzgerald. So most of my knowledge about this comes from listening to that. So
we'll put it in the show
shout
notes.
out to them. We'll put it in the show notes.
Also, do they want to come on our podcast?
I know, right? I will be DMing them. History Chicks, I'm coming for you. In a friendly way. That sounded very threatening.
If I make any contributions, mine will be based on the novel Z, by the way, which I read about Zelda Fitzgerald. Also highly recommend. Great read.
So Zelda and Scott Fitzgerald, there's a whole lot to it. Basically, they had a wildly toxic relationship. Zelda ended up spending some time in some like mental health institutions off and on because everything was just so terrible. And it was, you know, when she was with him, it was worse, but they still seem to have this. It's a really interesting situation because you don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but they seem to still have some sort of connection, as terrible as it was, which, like, Daisy and Gatsby, you can see a lot in that. And Daisy, a lot of Daisy seems to be very much Zelda. But this line specifically, which is really interesting, is so Zelda would I said that in the wrong order. F. Scott Fitzgerald would take a lot of Zelda's things that she said, things that she did, or lift things from her diary or things that she had written, and put them. Yes.
Which did he have permission?
No,
Maybe.
Not really.
Yeah,
there's a lot of, like, really they had, like, a lot of fights about it, or things that she would write something and then he would straight up publish it under his name. And they, you know, like, she would get upset about it, but it was like, well, we need money, and, like, his name was more famous. And it reminded me a lot of the Dorothy Wordsworth that we talked about in our eco-criticism episode, how William Wordsworth would take from her and she knew but wasn't really okay. This was like a Zelda. The Fitzgeralds were much more toxic and fighting about it than the Wordsworth seemed to have been, from what I read.
You're just redeeming the women that should get the credit on this podcast.
There's a long history of this. But this particular line is so sad to me because it is, so when Zelda gave birth,
be a beautiful fool.
The hope she'll be a beautiful fool. Because when Zelda gave birth to her daughter, F. Scott Fitzgerald was walking around the room taking notes of things she said and things she did because he knew that it was like, oh, this could be good for a future book. And in that experience, when she gave birth to her daughter, Zelda said, I hope she'll be a beautiful fool. Like, this line is lifted. The sadness of that was, like, literally what Zelda was feeling when she said that about her daughter.